now we're ready to do a quick review from last time. We were almost finished, I think. We were almost finished with discussing stage 2 of the demographic transition model. If you want to open the Blackboard app, if you've got the app on your phone, I posted in the week 3 folder a picture of a demographic transition chart, a graph, like I poorly drew over here in the corner of the board, but there's a very detailed picture in the week 3 folder. I'm hoping that I shared it with my face-to-face students in addition to my online ones. Do y'all see it there by chance? Okay, good. As I was saying that, I thought, I hope I shared it with the face-to-face students too. So anyway, if you want to have that open while we're talking about this, we're in stage 2 is what we're talking about. And as we were pointing out, and
So this is it?
laughing, yes, that's it. Yes, that's it. Excellent. So anyway, that's from, just I did a Google search of demographic transition and went to images and found one that looked like it had good info on it that supported what we were talking about in class. I think it's page 44 in our textbook where there is a very different representation of, or less complete, I will say, representation of the demographic transition model, and this one gives us some more information. Okay, so in stage 2, just to recap, who's got your notes open from stage 2? What happens with, first of all, what does NIR stand for? Natural increase rate, and remember I did kind of good. Remember I kind of put air quotes around natural because we call it natural, but there might be some interference with nature that people use to affect birth and death rates, right? I think there was a question on the quiz about that, I think. What about CDR? Crude death rate, right? And then CBR, crude birth rate. Okay, so we know that in stage 1, which takes up all of human history up to the Industrial Revolution essentially, right? Huge section of human history. We have very small groups. Birth rate was high, but so was death rate, and that's why INR stays relatively the same. And so in that chart that you see that I've posted, you'll see like these lines separating the stages, and so you can look at birth rate's high, but it's staying the same. Death rate's high, staying the same. Natural increase rate, low, but staying the same. Stage 2 is the transition where we've already talked about much of it, but it's the transition where natural increase rate goes way up. It begins to, I guess you could say, skyrocket, right? It begins to go way up. And why, in looking at the chart, either here on the board or on the one that I posted on Blackboard, what would your sum up in like a sentence or two? Why is this natural increase rate skyrocketing?
There were many children like needed for farming, like at the beginning.
At the beginning, when we see agriculture, when we see farming be the predominant subsistence strategy, what do we need children for in farming? We need farmhands, right? There was a necessity. Big families were not just a novelty, not merely for maybe religious beliefs, not for some of the reasons that we hear today in the modern world when we hear big families. Quite often there is a religious foundation for the numbers of children in a family over that. Lucas, what did you look up? You looked up the average number of children per household. It was way lower than I thought. It was like 1.
It said in 2019 it was 1.93.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how you qualified that 1 point. I've already forgotten. 935. Still living in the house. Yeah. Okay. So that might be a little lower than actually how many children they actually had, but like are 18 and under still living in the house. Yeah. These days, do we think of children as a financial asset? What does asset mean? A benefit. We don't really think of, not everyone anyways, thinks of children as an economic asset. Most folks think about how expensive those little critters are, right? Kids cost money, right? So, but back then, like Carla pointed out, the birth rate was still pretty high because there was a ton of work to be done. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, remember, there weren't, pretty much the only thing you had to help you out was a cart like this rolling cart that is still very useful. I've got the computer sitting on a rolling cart. That's still very useful in our modern society. We had that kind of thing. We had hand tools and implements, hand saws and implements. We had oxen to pull these carts, but we didn't have plows, big plows that an oxen could pull behind them to do the work of 3 men at a time, right? So how do we get that work of 3 men done? We have those men in child form, right? You have really huge families. So this became a habit, okay? So there was I guess you could say, a cultural trend. The cultural trend in stage 2, when there was really skyrocketing NIR, the cultural trend was huge families. And the predominant reason was children are labor. Children are, as a matter of fact, in this kind of society, the cheapest labor you can find, because they can contribute to the food production that they need to sustain themselves, in addition to contribute to the rest of the family, in addition to contributing to any kind of surplus food production. What does this word surplus mean? Extra, excess, abundance, all of those words I'm hearing you say is correct. In stage 1 of the demographic transition model, food was not produced in surplus. Surplus wasn't a concept that you'd think of regarding food. Why?
Because it was not manipulated by us.
Excellent. In stage 1, on foraging societies and small-scale horticulture societies, there was not a whole bunch of modification to the environment. There was a ton of human-environment interaction. That part of Mr. Help, there was a ton of that. But it wasn't nearly the same as it is in agriculture, where you clear large areas of land, where you plow it up, you take all the rocks out, you cut all the trees down, and you artificially manipulate the yield. You get a surplus. So now we see, in stage 2, we see that food has a cost. So I'm just using the dollar sign here just to represent that money is involved now as far as food goes. Stage 1, food was a basic human right, but there wasn't a whole lot to go around because the cultural habit was only to let nature provide. In stage 2, the cultural habit changed. We don't just let nature provide, we manipulate nature to give us what we want, what we need, and surplus. And why do we want surplus? We want to sell it. It's not because we want to get fat by eating surplus. We want a surplus because we can get money for that surplus. When the population goes up, you've got this decreasing death rate contributing significantly to this population going up. What does this, is there a connection, let me rephrase that, is there a connection between this decreasing CDR and a surplus of food?
Yes.
Why? What's the yes?
More food, so, I don't know, I guess less deaths because of malnutrition.
Exactly, the malnutrition thing, you hit the nail on the head. So yes, there are going to be fewer deaths per 1,000 people based on these natural causes. People used to have huge families because half of them died, right? In the foraging, half of them died, or as we talked about, maybe we artificially kept the population low by practicing different kinds of cultural habits to get rid of unwanted pregnancies. So this surplus means there's way more food to go around. So if the flu comes around, like we're in the middle of flu season right now, if the flu hits a malnourished child, because malnourished why? Well, there wasn't a surplus of food. So if you were malnourished and the flu comes around and you had 10 siblings, well, half of them could be gone by the time you are awake and fine and recovered from the flu yourself. And so, yes, this food, being able to produce more food, significantly contributed to the decline in death rate, but the birth rate stayed the same for a while because of a concept called culture lag. Culture lag. Oops. Okay, so culture lag means habits in a society kind of fall behind, they drag behind what industry, what technology, what knowledge is, going to allow for the culture to be in the future. So this is falling behind, or habits and behaviors. Habits and behaviors falling behind pace with social progress. The habits specifically that we're talking about here, due to stage 2 and due to increased food production, is going to be we're still having huge families. Now, when we're having huge families, more of them survive until adulthood, and there's less work that we need them to do because the Industrial Revolution has created a situation where we have plows. We have machinery to help with harvests. They were rudimentary at first. You and I might see, what kind of TV show, old-fashioned TV show could we watch to see this? Little House on the Prairie, that's a good example. If y'all have ever watched that, where Pa is out in that's his name, Pa, is out in the field, and he's, got a horse with a harness on it, and he's walking kind of beside this thing that the horse is pulling. And so that one man and that horse with the plow, they can just chop them off walking up and down in that field. Walking up and down in that field, tilling up the soil and getting it plantable. So just that one man could plow all the fields that they wanted with that beast of burden, that horse, and that plow that was invented. Okay? So you and I think of machine. Okay, Industrial Revolution, this was machines. It really wasn't machines until the end of the Industrial Revolution. Okay? Toward the end of the Industrial Revolution is where we see machines with engines. You've heard of the steam engine and the locomotive. This was a huge innovation that really changed population, really changed society. And you also see, because it's changing society so much and less work needs to be devoted to just agriculture and food getting strategies, we can diversify what our population works on. And so there's also, at the same time that the Industrial Revolution is happening, where rudimentary machines and then machines with gears and engines are developed, we see, excuse me, Michelle, we see or hear about something called the medical revolution. The medical revolution. Have you heard this before? Anybody talk to you about this in history classes? Yeah, so the medical revolution is innovations like new medicines. Innovations like, here's what I was going to ask y'all to look up. I remembered what I was going to ask y'all to look up on your phones if you want to. Things like germ theory. Have you heard that phrase before? Germ theory. We don't refer to germ theory too much anymore because it's pretty much not a guess anymore. It's pretty much for sure that we know that germs can pass disease from one person to the next. So germ theory is a part of a long transition. I believe someone first suggested it like way back in the 1500s or something. But it really wasn't until the end of the 1700s through the first part of the 1900s before, again, culture lag caught up with the information that we knew about germs, and doctors who had come to be very influential during the medical revolution. Can you imagine your doctor not washing his hands or her hands before they do any kind of surgery that you need?
I remember there was I think it was a German doctor who was bringing up this exact thing, the germ theory, and no one would believe him. And he kept going on about it.
No one would believe him. Look up what is that German doctor's name, because I think it was a German doctor who finally got us got people in general. Do Did you find it? Anyway, there's
I haven't
like,
found it yet.
yeah, there's several doctors and several scientists over the centuries that were arguing, there's germs, and like, we can't see that. You're ridiculous to think that there's something tiny.
Yeah,
that,
and you got
right?
put in a mental asylum.
Yeah, I mean,
You
think
got
about
it.
this for a second. And this is part of the culture lag too. I didn't finish putting, culture lag again, where we fall behind what the progress is. We've got this guy who's a scientist telling us that there's little bitty tiny things spreading through the air, or that maybe I have it under my fingernails and I need to do some surgery on you or something. And even under my fingernails, I can transmit it to you. And I haven't washed and I haven't worn gloves and I haven't, for you and me, does that sound crazy? Like, would you let a doctor touch you even in the exam room without gloves on? He wouldn't do it either. She wouldn't do it either. Right? So anyway, this is part of the medical revolution. One of the things that helped contribute, especially to the transition from stage 2 to stage 3, where we see natural increase rates continue to climb, but they don't climb as sharply as they have in stage 2. They continue to climb, but it slows, the increase slows, but it's predominantly from the medical revolution and infrastructure. We're going to talk about that too. Did you find it, Jonathan?
I'm still looking.
Yeah.
I can't
Was
see the-
Robert Koch or something? I think that was his name.
That's one of them, yes. There's like 3 or
There's
4.
Louis Pasteur. There was someone
Pasteur
before.
came, yes,
There
Pasteur
someone
was like,
before Louis Pasteur, but
Mhm.
it just wasn't accepted, so we got
exactly,
put in.
it wasn't
I don't know.
accepted, and that's what culture lag can do to us. It's not just, culture lag is not simply, well, as an example of culture lag, my 90-year-old father lives with me. I take care of him. He is still extremely suspicious of microwaved food. Okay? Yes, I'm glad that you're frowning because you don't know anything about his era of, but I don't know, microwaves started to really kind of be a common thing that people other than the military had access to in like the early 80s. Maybe late 70s, I might be slightly off, right? And so he was already fully an adult at that time, right? He's 90 now, and he just is suspicious about heating up food with those weird things that might change I don't know, I can't remember what his argument was, but when I think about his argument about using the microwave oven and his suspicions about how, weird this microwave oven is and whether it's a plot to actually, take over a population by changing I don't know, right? Okay, yes, okay. So that is think about that mindset, people being so suspicious that we're going to put this doctor in jail, or not jail, a mental asylum, you said, because they're suggesting that germs could be transmitted from one place to the next. Through coughing, through touching, through whatever.
Here it is. Okay.
You found it?
Ignace Simonis.
Would
He
you
was
please spell
he was a Hungarian physician and scientist, and actually this was around the time.
Did you say Ignace is his first name?
Ignaz, I-G-N-A-Z.
I-G-N-A-Z, Ignace.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's Hungarian.
Hungarian. What's the last name?
Simolis. So S-E-M-M-E-L-W-E-I-S. And
W-E-I.
this was actually-
Semmelweis.
it was
Okay.
literally like a couple years, or it was around the time Louis Pasteur.
Exactly,
like in
just a few years
1850s.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
so toward the
And
end
so-
of the Industrial Revolution, where manual labor is getting to be very, very much easier and more efficient because of machines, we have a whole bunch of population, right? We've really increased that population, and therefore we've got wider variety of jobs to go into, and the Industrial Revolution is happening right now. Part of the revolution was a revolution in knowledge, because people were freer from their manual labor, and they could do research, and they could actually make their living off of research and innovation and technology. They were too busy before to do that because you had to, you had to work in the land just to keep food on the table. Your work was focused on food. the Industrial Revolution changed life so much. And it also changed the ability for populations to sustain themselves. Did you find something else we need to know?
No, I was
No?
just confirming that. It was
Just
a couple
confirming?
years
Yes.
before. Yeah.
So, and there were other people other than him, so he was Hungarian and not German. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, he's one of them that, and I scratched out the word theory. I don't know if you remember, just because theory, of course, is a suggestion that things work the way that they do, right? So germ theory was something that really had to be sold to the general public. And before you agreed that there were microscopic things floating around in the air or in our saliva or in our blood or whatever, we could transmit it from one person to the next. Before you actually agreed that this could possibly be true, you had this death rate was really, really high, but when we started to learn not only what Carla said a minute ago, you've got way more food available for these people, so youngsters that were dying because of malnutrition, or even middle-aged people and elderly people who were dying from malnutrition, if they got one slight infection or a cold could kill you if you were malnourished. Now we don't have nearly as much malnourishment, but we also have innovation in medical research. And what innovation am I talking about? Something as simple as germ theory. Like germs will kill you, right? Diseases can be transmitted this way. We're actually going to watch a little video in just a second of modern day and how there are still places in the world where the Industrial Revolution hasn't really happened all the way yet, right? You have heard of, I'll use this space on the board over here, you have heard of these classifications for countries, I think. Developed, and what's next? Developing, like in the process of,
And underdeveloped.
and underdeveloped or undeveloped, oops, I wrote it twice. Developing and underdeveloped, okay. So these words are directly linked to this concept of demographic transition. There are some, I told you I think at the beginning, I should have, and if I didn't, flip back to your notes now and make sure that you indicate that there are no countries of the world today in stage 1. Okay, good. Okay, good. So I did say it. Okay, so there are no countries in the world today on stage 1. There are groups here and there, like the Yanomami or the Maasai, that could technically be considered to be in stage 1. The Maasai maybe is a poor example, but there are some isolated groups that don't belong to just one country or the next that could be argued that are still in stage 1. But stage 2 is questionable. We're going to look at, it's questionable as to whether there are still, countries or societies or huge portions of populations that are still in stage 2. Sir?
Did we take a quiz then?
Yes, we did.
Oh.
Oh,
I didn't know.
okay, we have quizzes all the time though, so if you missed this one, which yes you did, don't worry, don't
Okay.
fret, okay? All right, so, other questions? Let's see, wait. Oh, no, I'm not finished with stage 2 yet. But any questions so far? Okay, so the next thing that we need to know that's happening toward the end of stage 2, during and toward the end of stage 2 is another word. There's two more things we need to talk about. One of them is urbanization. We might have that in our notes already briefly on Tuesday. What does urbanization mean?
The growth of cities.
Yes. So anytime you see ization on the end of something, what does that mean? What's that refer to? No, you don't know this one? When you see ology on the end of something, what does that refer to? Study of. You need to know this one too. Since you know ology is study of, you need to know ization means process of. Process happening. There is a process happening. It's the process of something taking place. So what process is taking place during industrialization?
Movement to like cities.
No, I'm sorry. Listen to the question.
Oh, industrial.
Yeah. So if you see an ization, if I say industrialization is taking place, what does that mean? The process of what happening? Industry, manufacturing, building up of research and knowledge, that's what's happening. So industrialization is what classifies the degree of industrialization, is what separates these three types of country distinctions in the world. Developed nations have a very high degree of industrialization, right? It's happening, it's on its way in developing nations. And what about underdeveloped? It either ain't there at all, or it doesn't like affect the majority of the population yet. Like maybe there's just a pocket or two where there's like mining is going great guns and there's a whole lot of wonderful minerals in the soil here, but only one corporation has built the factory to extract it, and it doesn't benefit the population, for instance. So underdeveloped means it's either not reached it yet at all, or it's isolated and doesn't benefit the rest of society. Okay, so urbanization then is the process of what?
Cities.
Citifying. Can I make that a word? Is that a word? Can't I'll make that a
I
word.
think that's a word.
Citifying?
Cities are forming.
I don't-
Is that a?
I
We'll
don't
make
think
that a
that's
word.
That's
I think
not
it
a
needs
word.
to be a new geography word. Anyway, that's what urbanization means. You're building cities, okay? Citifaction, I don't know. Not a word. But anyway, okay. So if it helps us remember this concept, then remember fake words like citify, okay? Because that's what urbanization is. It's the process of building cities. This had to happen, as you know, during the Industrial Revolution because you're going to build one big factory to do the work. You're not going to build, you know, if you sell to 17 different cities, whatever you're manufacturing, you're not going to build 17 factories to sell to those cities. You're going to build one big factory and transport things to the 17 cities or 17 towns. And then the factory that you build is going to need services. So other things like shopping malls and haircutting places and doctors and lawyers and banks and keep on going is going to build up around that factory. And that's how this city building happened. Apartment buildings, houses, all of these kinds of things happen in the city building process. Good thing for population growth or bad thing for population growth? Good thing? Maybe? History shows that... double-edged sword, I like that response. History shows that we have increased population as citifaction has happened, as urbanization has happened. However, here's where we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, infrastructure. I don't know why I like talking about this topic, but I think I like talking about this topic because not a whole lot of us know about it maybe. Have y'all heard this term before? You have? Okay, some of you have. I get a lot of students who haven't even heard the term before, and I guess that's why I like to enlighten people, so I like to talk about this. But do a search, ask Siri or something for some examples of infrastructure. I'm going to start listing some also, and then you can help me with my list, okay?
Buildings. Huh.
Somebody help me start calling out stuff so I can put it on the board.
Dams.
Oh, dams. Supplies in general, supply chains especially. Supply chain.
Yeah.
Power, that's why I started, yes, I'll put power instead of electricity because any kind of power source. Because usually the dams are going to be for a couple of reasons. What are we going to use dams for?
Power.
Power is a major reason why dams are built, but what
Irrigation.
else? Maybe we're going to do irrigation so that land that wasn't farmable before now has a water resource to make it what we call arable.
She's saying water.
Yes.
You guys said that.
So power, irrigation for crops, or drinkable water. That's what you're talking about, Lakeisha? Like drinking water?
stores.
Let's see, I guess I started, what did I start to write there, y'all?
Power.
Oh, okay, so I wrote it up there instead. Okay, so the dams can do that, or like later on, the electrical grid, right? So, you know, electricity was, not part of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, communications.
Communication systems, mass communication, excellent. Communication systems, what else? Bridges, of course, are included in here.
Health and education.
Health and education, yes, we said that we're having a medical revolution here too. Education also. Have y'all seen anything in your list yet for something like sanitation?
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So, okay, you meant it, and whoever said utilities maybe included it.
Mass transit.
Mass transit, yes.
Sanitation was what I was thinking about.
Excellent.
When I was talking about a double-edged sword. 'Cause
Exactly. I'm
That's
glad that you
exactly
went
what I
back
was
to that,
thinking about.
Jonathan, because this sanitation thing is usually, well, first off, when we say sanitation, what does it mean to you?
Cleaning.
Things that are to clean something, you mean? Like it's a...
Yeah.
Okay, let me say this. Infrastructure, I guess I didn't give a definition of this, although you can find it in your textbook, or I'm sure the list that you were reading from starts with a definition of infrastructure, right? Infrastructure are the facilities that are built, the resources that are built that help human populations survive. Infrastructure can also be, all of these things are really like tangible things. What does tangible mean?
It's subject to change.
No. I mean, these
It
are
can
subject
be
to
changed.
change, but what does the word tangible compared to intangible mean?
Like physical.
Physical features, yes. Infrastructure is often thought of as physical features, but infrastructure also can be like research facilities where intangible or ideas, non-physical features can be created too. So infrastructure includes knowledge, systems to continually test and prove and discover new knowledge, and also the physical things. The physical things like buildings in general, health and education, systems and processes, buildings devoted to that, buildings devoted to hospitals, buildings devoted to clinics, all these kinds of things. Roads, bridges, tunnels, like somebody said the other day, mass transit, transportation in general. When transportation gets easier, then it is easier to build, it's easier to urbanize, it's easier to transmit knowledge and interact with the environment like that, right? Your regions get kind of, would I say they get smaller, or you're able to travel wider places so the world seems maybe smaller, and it's the first steps toward globalization, right? Yeah, so all of these things are part of infrastructure. This happens when urbanization happens. And Jonathan was absolutely correct when he said, oh, urbanization, it helps with population, but it's a double-edged sword. Because if all of these things aren't part of your urbanization process, and usually this one, for some reason, is the one that's neglected, the things that are included in sanitation are things like garbage collection, things like sewage disposal. And I don't just mean sewage disposal, I mean when you have indoor plumbing and you flush your toilet, where's that stuff supposed to go? Into what we call a sewer?
Into the sewer.
But what if the sewer's not there? What if there ain't none?
Well done.
Outhouse.
It doesn't have to be indoor plumbing, it can be an outhouse.
it
An
out of your
outhouse
house?
is a way, but
Into the soil or something?
well, but how far, like, how does it get, sure, it'll
You
go
just
into
toss
the
it out of
soil,
your
like,
house.
like Lucas was talking about an outhouse. Okay, you just toss it out of your house. I'm not coming to your house, Jonathan.
No.
But, I know.
that's
No,
what they did.
but that's what that's what can happen. And if I'm living in if we're living in really close proximity to each other, and there's no organized system to get rid of that stuff, can we make each other, can all of us, what if all of us are living right next door to each other, so close together, and we have waste in our house? We have food waste that's not disgusting to begin with, but if we don't have garbage pickup to take it away, or we don't have some kind of way to efficiently and safely compost it, That waste, throwing that kind of food waste can attract animals. These animals have diseases. These animals defecate where my house is. But where are we going to defecate and take that sewage? We can dump it outside our house, but her house is right outside my house. And his house is right outside her house. And we're dumping this stuff right outside our house. We're tracking it in. Yeah, so I see, yeah. It's bad. So urbanization can really help with this increase. We're still calling it a natural increase rate, right? Even though I don't know whether we would really be successful in arguing that urbanization is a natural part of the environment. So again, in other words, my challenge to this word is not, it's not going to change anything. But infrastructure, in addition, this city building is so complicated because buildings can go up to give us a roof over our heads. They can go up to give us a roof over our heads to protect us from the environment. But if there's buildings going up to put roofs over our heads and all of us are living in even closer proximity to each other, and we all have waste that has to be disposed of, if that waste is not disposed of in an efficient, safe, sanitized manner, we can die, right? At least be sick, at least be unhealthy, maybe become infertile
But
or whatever.
how would that cause death? How could you die?
Ooh, we are going to watch a video.
Rats, germs.
Yes. How would it cause death? Just the same way that if you were malnourished, so back to when we were talking about being malnourished, you might have 10 children, big family. You need a big family for a couple reasons back in the day. You need a lot of workers, but also you got to have more than you think you need because probably some of them won't survive. Why did probably some of them not survive? They were malnourished, and people still get colds, people still get the flu, and most of us can overcome that. But if we have a pre-existing condition like malnourishment, that can kill us. So the death rate was high for one reason the death rate was high was that, malnourishment. We've taken care of that situation now. The Industrial Revolution has helped us take care of that situation now. We've got tons of food, surplus of food. We have so much food that we can start putting on meat on our bones and then sell it and get profit from it. So we're not dying for that reason, but if we urbanize because of the factories and because of industrialization, if we build shelters for people to live in, people need a way to dispose of their waste. And if we haven't already figured out a clean way to dispose of it and it just goes out on the surface where you and I have to walk, where animals walk, where our kids go and play, and how many of y'all have little kids? They pick up everything and stick it in their mouth. Y'all are too young to have little kids yet, but they pick up everything and stick it in their mouth, right? And then we pick up them and they stick their fingers in our mouth, right? Right? That's how we can get sick and die. Because there's much worse things that can be transmitted than just the flu and the cold, like I've used as examples. And this short video that we're going to watch, which I will go ahead and call up now. So if you're my online student, I will pause this video right now or end it, and then show y'all the video and give you a heads up on what we discussed for the rest of class. So let me stop this.